Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you enjoy meaningful stories filled with love and hope, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment that touches your heart. Now let's begin today's story. Montana. December. The snow kept falling as if the sky itself was grieving. On a small hill overlooking the town of Oakridge, the cemetery lay blanketed in ice. A simple oak coffin was slowly lowered into the frozen ground. Only a few people stood around, mostly neighbors who had known Anna Morgan, the young woman who had succumbed to tuberculosis after more than 2 months of silent suffering. 12-year-old Elena Morgan stood quietly in the snow, a faded scarf wrapped around her neck, her brown hair messy beneath a worn wool hat. She did not cry. Her eyes were wide open, as if all her tears had long since dried up. The cold no longer reached her. She had already lost the warmest thing in her world, her mother. None of Anna's family attended the funeral. Ever since Anna became pregnant out of wedlock, her relatives had cut ties with her. She was a stain, a disgrace. Elena, the child without a father, was the living reminder of that shame. After the service ended, a woman from social services, Martha Jackson, stepped forward. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you'll be taken to the Helena Youth Center for now. After the holidays, we'll try to find a more permanent place for you." Elena didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the grave, her heart hollow. A drifting child, without home, without kin. And then, a man's voice broke the silence. "I'll take the girl." Everyone turned. A tall man stood near the edge of the cemetery, snow clinging to his old charcoal gray coat. It was Mr. Matthew Ferris, a high school literature and history teacher at Oakridge High. He was known for being punctual, reclusive, and utterly private. No wife, no children. He lived alone in a cabin at the edge of town. Martha frowned. "Mr. Ferris, this isn't so simple. You're single, you have no criminal record, but a man living alone, wanting to adopt a 12-year-old girl? It's not that I want to," he said quietly. "It's that I must. If no one takes her in, she'll disappear into the system. I won't let that happen." A long silence followed. The wind rustled through the bare trees, carrying with it the faint sound of church bells. Martha stepped away, pulling out her phone to call the welfare office. 2 weeks later, after a string of interviews and emergency paperwork, temporary guardianship was approved, with conditions. Elena would remain under regular supervision, and Mr. Ferris had to fully cooperate with child services. The day Elena moved into his wooden cabin, the snow was thick and unforgiving. The house stood near the edge of a pine forest, far from the town center. It was small and old, but clean. Beige curtains hung over the windows, and the wooden floors creaked slightly beneath her boots. Inside, it smelled of pine and silence. Mr. Ferris led her upstairs. "This is your room," he said. "There's a warm blanket on the bed. Books in the corner if you want to read." Elena set down her worn canvas bag. It held everything she owned: a few pieces of clothing, her mother's journal, and a bracelet with her name, gifted by her mother when she turned 8. That evening, they ate lentil soup and stale bread. Mr. Ferris didn't speak much. Neither did Elena. They sat at a small wooden table under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. "She's very quiet," he thought. But he understood. She had lost her mother, her home, and her childhood, all in a matter of weeks. The following days settled into a routine. Mr. Ferris taught her at home: literature, math, history, even music. In the afternoons they did chores together: shoveling snow, cleaning, cooking. Elena was a quiet but quick learner. Her memory was sharp. But what struck Mr. Ferris most was her gaze, always observant, as if she were searching for something in him. One afternoon, while reading in his study, he noticed Elena standing silently in the hallway. When she saw him looking, she quickly walked away. That night, he asked, "Do you have something you want to ask me?" Elena shook her head. But as he turned to leave, she suddenly said, "You knew my mom before, didn't you?" He froze. A moment passed. "She was a former student," he replied quickly, then turned away. But Elena knew he was hiding something. A question had begun to take shape in her mind. Why would a stranger take me in unless there was something more? One frigid morning, while exploring the house, Elena came upon a small attic door that was locked. The door was old but showed signs of recent use. She touched the handle. It was cold. From beneath the door she caught a faint scent of lavender. That night she woke to a sound. Not the wind, it was crying. Tiptoeing out of her room, she crept down the hallway to the attic door. Silence, but her heart pounded. She felt it. Something about that space held secrets about her mother, and about the man who now cared for her. Later that night, she sat by the window, hugging her mother's journal. Snow continued to fall outside. The world was white, cold, silent. And in that stillness, Elena whispered a question meant only for herself. Who was he to my mother? And why me? Snow continued to fall thickly throughout the week, cloaking the entire town of Oakridge in an icy silence. The forest trails disappeared beneath a white blanket, and even the local school had to suspend classes due to the dangerously slick roads. But inside a small wooden cabin hidden beneath the pine trees, Elena Morgan continued her studies, reading, doing math, writing essays, and quietly observing the man she now lived with, Mr. Matthew Ferris. Mr. Ferris taught her seriously, yet without harshness. Every day he prepared a detailed schedule, guiding her through each subject. He didn't talk much, but always reminded her to eat, dress warmly, and occasionally made her hot cocoa when she did well. There was care in his actions, quiet, steady, and almost reluctant. Still, something about the house felt too quiet. Not just peaceful, unnaturally silent, like old books that had never been opened. Elena could feel it more each day, especially at night when the lights were out, the wind howled beyond the windows, and soft sobs seemed to echo from the locked attic above. One morning, after finishing a literature lesson, Elena asked, "Mr. Ferris, why do you live alone?" The question caught him off guard. He was pouring tea into a chipped ceramic mug, and his hand paused for a moment. Then he turned back with a calm tone. "Because some people don't belong to anyone." He gave her a slight smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Elena didn't press further, but inside her, the suspicion grew. She felt certain he wasn't just hiding something. He was hiding a lot. That afternoon, while Mr. Ferris went into town to get supplies, Elena tiptoed through the cabin, as if not to wake the house itself. She paused at the attic door. The lock was old but solid. She tried the knob, still locked. But as she knelt to examine the wood, she noticed a gap between the boards near the bottom, just wide enough to peek through. Holding her breath, she pressed her eye to the crack. Inside was a small room. A rocking chair, a bookshelf, a sheer curtain, and a vanity. On the vanity stood a picture frame. She couldn't quite make out the face, but somehow she knew it was her mother. Her heart pounded. Why would Mr. Ferris keep a photo of her mother in a locked attic room? And what else was he keeping in there? That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In her hands was her mother's old journal. She had read it dozens of times. Anna never mentioned Elena's father. Not once. Just one passage. "My sweet daughter, if the day comes when I'm not with you anymore, live well. And believe that somewhere, someone still loves you, even if you've never met them." She had always thought that was just a comforting line. Now it echoed in her head like a buried truth. A few days later, with the weather clearing slightly, Mr. Ferris let her go for a walk near the edge of the woods. On her way back, she spotted an older woman, Mrs. Lucia, walking up the hill from town. She was known for her sharp tongue and love of gossip. When she saw Elena, she stopped and gave her a look that was both curious and pitying. "You're the Morgan girl, aren't you?" she said. "Living with Mr. Ferris now?" Elena nodded. Mrs. Lucia pursed her lips. "Your mother was a beauty, that's for sure. But she stirred up quite a mess in her day. Rumor had it she seduced a young teacher at the high school, then vanished." Elena's eyes widened. "What, teacher?" The old woman smirked. "Take a guess. How many male teachers does this town have? And who are you living with now?" Elena froze. A cold wave ran down her spine, not from the wind, but from what had just been implied. That evening after dinner, Elena stood outside Mr. Ferris's study. "Mr. Ferris," she said softly, "I have a question." He looked up from his book. "Did you love my mother?" The room seemed to grow still. The fire crackled faintly, as if it too was listening. Mr. Ferris looked at her, his eyes clouded. "Elena, there are things you're not ready to know. But I want to know. I don't want to keep living in doubt." He remained silent for a long moment. "Tomorrow," he finally said. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything." That night, Elena didn't sleep. Again, she heard sounds from the attic. But this time it wasn't just quiet sobbing, it was whispering. She thought she heard her name. "Elena." She sat up in bed, clutching her mother's journal. The darkness in the cabin pressed in from all sides, full of unanswered questions. And she knew that her life and the truth about the man named Ferris would never be the same again. The next morning, Elena woke up very early. The snow had stopped falling overnight, leaving behind a dry, bitter cold. Pale sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft, golden glow on the wooden walls. She quietly made her way downstairs, anxiety knotting in her chest. Today, Mr. Ferris had promised to tell her the truth. The faint scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Mr. Ferris was sitting near the fireplace, reading the paper, looking as pensive as ever. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes showed a flicker of unease. "Elena," he said gently, "come sit. The sun's out, but it's still cold. Want some warm milk?" She nodded and sat across from him at the table. Her hands were clenched together, her breath shallow. After a long silence, he set his coffee down and looked her in the eye. "You once asked me if I had loved your mother." Elena nodded again, not breaking eye contact. "The answer is yes," he said with a deep sigh. "I loved your mother. Very much. When I first started teaching at Oakridge High School, she was a senior, bright, strong-willed, and different." Elena held her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest. "We crossed a line," he continued. "When it was discovered, she disappeared. I didn't know she was pregnant. Not a word, no contact. Years later, I received a letter from the hospital. She was dying and asked me to take care of you." His voice broke. "Elena, I'm not telling you this to ask for forgiveness. I just couldn't keep it from you forever. You deserve the truth." Elena stayed silent. She stared at the cup of milk in front of her, hands trembling. She didn't want to cry, but tears rolled down her cheeks anyway. "Then why didn't you tell me you were my father? Why did you hide it?" "Because of reputation, morality, the eyes of this town," he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought that if I could be near you, protect you from afar, it would be enough. I thought giving you peace was more important than claiming a title." But for Elena, that silence had become a burden. For 12 years she had lived without a father, only to learn that he had always been near, but never close enough. The days that followed were heavy and quiet. Though Mr. Ferris still cared for her as he always had, something between them had shifted. Elena no longer saw him only as a strict, kind teacher. He was now her father, a man who had missed every birthday, every sleepless night, every hug. And outside their cabin, whispers had begun to spread. Mrs. Lucia, after her conversation with Elena, hadn't kept the information to herself. The story spread like wildfire. People murmured in church pews, at the grocery store, in the barber's chair, "Ferris is raising his love child. They say the girl was born from an affair with a student. He's disgusting. That man teaches our children?" The gossip eventually reached Father Lawrence, the town's priest. One morning, he arrived at the cabin in person and knocked on the door. Elena heard the knock while reading upstairs. She came down just as Mr. Ferris opened the door. The priest stood tall in his black cassock and white scarf, illuminated by the pale morning sun. "Good morning, Mr. Ferris," the priest said, his voice calm but firm. "I think we need to talk." Mr. Ferris invited him in, made tea, and Elena stood quietly in the kitchen, listening closely. "I know you're a good man, Mr. Ferris," Father Lawrence began. "But this is a small town, and rumors move faster than wind. Some things can't remain hidden forever. What would you have me do?" Mr. Ferris asked evenly. "I think you should reconsider your guardianship of the girl," the priest said softly. "For honor, for morality, a man who once had a relationship with the mother now living with the daughter, to the outside world, it's troubling." Silence filled the room. Mr. Ferris gripped his teacup tightly, but his eyes remained calm. "Elena is not an object for judgment. She is my daughter, and I will not abandon her." Father Lawrence sighed and stood. "Then you should prepare yourself. What's coming will not be easy." And he was right. Only days later, an anonymous complaint was sent to both the Department of Education and Child Protective Services. It read, "A teacher with inappropriate history is now living with his illegitimate daughter, damaging the reputation of educators across our town." Soon the local news caught wind of the scandal. Tabloids printed sensational headlines: "Beloved teacher hiding love child from scandalous affair. Respected educator or secret sinner." Oakridge had never been so shaken. Elena was no longer just a child searching for answers. She realized she had to act, to speak up, to step out of the shadow of the rumors and defend the man who, despite everything, was her father. One day she quietly wrote a letter by hand. She sent it to Child Services and the Oakridge High School board. In it she told the entire story, her mother's love, her birth, Mr. Ferris's quiet sacrifices, and one final truth. He is my father, not a monster, just a man who tried to atone in silence. She signed it, Elena Morgan Ferris. The early spring days in Oakridge were still bitterly cold. The snow hadn't fully melted, revealing patches of muddy ground between the last frosty layers. Elena rarely left the cabin anymore. Ever since the rumors had spread, she couldn't bear to hear someone call her a child of sin one more time. Mr. Ferris had been suspended from teaching while the investigation unfolded. The house, once simply quiet, now felt heavy with silence. Meals passed without a word. He no longer taught lessons, just sat by the window reading the same book over and over. One night, while he had dozed off in the armchair, Elena quietly climbed the stairs. She held a small hairpin in her hand, the only thing she could find to try and unlock the attic door. She didn't know if what she was doing was right or wrong, but something in her heart told her. The final piece of the truth was hidden there. The old, rusted lock gave way after a few tries. The door creaked open, releasing a faint scent of lavender and old wood. The room was smaller than she expected. Candlelight from the holder in her hand revealed dust-covered walls. There was a small, neatly made bed, a thin lace curtain swaying at the window, and a vanity draped with a white cloth. On the table, next to an old photo frame, it was her mother, younger, smiling, sat a dark wooden box carefully placed. It had a simple latch. She opened it. Inside was a worn leather journal, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. She opened the journal. It was her mother's diary, beginning from her final year of high school. March 4. Saw Mr. Ferris again today. He's not like the others. When he reads poetry, the class holds its breath. I don't know why, but my heart races when I see him. May 15th. I think I love him. I know it's wrong, but the feeling is so strong, I can't stop it. September 1. I'm leaving Oakridge. I know I'm pregnant. No one can find out. I don't blame him. He doesn't know. This is my choice. I will raise the baby, alone. Elena turned the pages, tears falling onto the faded ink. Then came the letters, all addressed to one person, Matthew. I read your poems at night before I fall asleep. I imagine you sitting beside my bed, reading aloud. I want to tell you I'm pregnant, but I'm scared. Scared you'll give up everything for me. I don't want to destroy your life. If one day our daughter asks why you never claimed her, please forgive me. I chose to hide it all. Not out of shame, but because I wanted her to live in peace. Elena's hands trembled. Every word cut deeper than the last. Now she understood. She understood why her mother never spoke of her father, why Mr. Ferris had appeared at the exact moment she thought she had no one left, why he had endured every accusation in silence just to stay near her. She placed everything back in the box, clutched it to her chest, and went downstairs. Mr. Ferris was still asleep in the armchair, the firelight casting soft shadows on his face, revealing lines that hadn't been there before. Elena sat on the rug, right at his feet, and whispered, I know everything now. He stirred. His eyes slowly opened and fell on her, and the box. Elena, I read her diary, the letters. I understand why you didn't claim me. But I don't need a guardian anymore. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. I need a father. There was silence, and then Mr. Ferris exhaled deeply. His eyes glistened. I'm sorry. I don't need an apology, she said. I just need for you not to leave me again. For the first time since they began living together, Mr. Ferris leaned down and wrapped his arms around her, not as a teacher, but as a father. And in that small, time-worn house, warmed by the flickering fire, two souls once separated by silence found their way back to each other. The next day, Elena wrote a short letter and sent it to the town hall and Child Protective Services. She included copies of her mother's journal pages, along with a final statement. Mr. Matthew Ferris is not hiding a crime. He is my father. He is not a predator nor a deceiver, but a man forced to live in silence for love. It's time the truth was heard. In early April, Oakridge was no longer blanketed in snow, but the wind remained sharp, as if trying to hold on to winter's final breath. The melting snow revealed puddles and patches of slush on the sidewalks. Yet inside Elena's heart, the cold had not thawed. The clearer everything became, the deeper the pain grew. After sending her letter to the public, both Elena and Mr. Ferris barely left the cabin. Reporters still showed up, knocking on the door, with some even pretending to be delivery people just to get close. Local police had been called twice in 1 week, and while the public remained divided, the Child Welfare Office scheduled an emergency hearing to assess the suitability of Elena Morgan's current living arrangement. The night before the hearing, Elena couldn't sleep. She walked out of her room, down the hallway, the yellow lamplight casting long shadows across the wooden walls. She found Mr. Ferris still awake, sitting in the living room, as if he had been waiting. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently, eyes fixed on the fireplace. "No," she answered. "I'm scared." "What are you afraid of?" She sat cross-legged on the floor across from him, hugging a pillow. "I'm afraid they'll separate us, that they won't believe us, that I'll have to live with someone else." Mr. Ferris didn't answer right away. He poured her a cup of warm cocoa and placed it gently in her hands. "Elena, no matter what happens tomorrow, you must remember this. You are not anyone's mistake. You are the best thing your mother left behind, and the only thing that ever made me feel like I still had worth." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Dad, can I call you that?" He nodded, barely above a whisper. "I used to think you were a stranger," she continued, "but when I read Mom's journal, I understood. She chose to keep you a secret to protect you, but I know she still loved you, and now I see both of you loved me in your own ways." A tear slipped down Mr. Ferris's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "I was a coward, Elena. When your mother left town, I stayed silent. I didn't look for her. I didn't face the truth. I didn't fight for you. I just lived with regret. But you came back," she whispered. "You showed up when I had no one left, and to me, that's enough." They sat there quietly for a long time. The fire slowly dimmed. Outside, the wind rustled through the pine trees like a whisper from time itself. And in the stillness, Elena knew one thing for sure: she was no longer alone. The next morning, the sky was overcast. Elena wore the gray knit dress her mother had made for her last year, with a thick coat over it. Mr. Ferris wore a modest suit and tie. They didn't say much as they walked into the small hearing room at the back of Town Hall. It wasn't a large room, but it was full of people. 2 social workers, a representative from the local government, a lawyer from the school board, and the town's judge, Mrs. Karen Dunley, known for her stern demeanor. As Elena and Mr. Ferris entered, many eyes followed them. Curious, judgmental, some even pitying. They sat side by side. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent comfort. Judge Dunley opened the folder in front of her, then looked up at them. "Mr. Matthew Ferris, according to the record, you previously had an inappropriate relationship with Elena Morgan's mother while she was your student. Is that correct?" Mr. Ferris nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you were unaware of Elena's existence until her mother was on her deathbed?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you come forward as her father?" He swallowed hard, his voice slightly trembling. "Because I was afraid. I lacked the courage. But everything I've done since taking her in has been out of love and responsibility." Judge Dunley turned to Elena. "And you, Elena, what can you say about this relationship?" Elena took a deep breath. She stood up, holding a small sheet of notes, then let it fall, deciding to speak from the heart. "When my mother died, I thought I had no one left. I didn't know who Mr. Ferris was, but he took me in, cared for me, taught me, listened to me. When I found out the truth, I was angry. But I also realized he wasn't just a teacher. He is my father. A father who stayed silent, who sacrificed, who never asked for anything in return." She turned to look at him, then faced the room. "I don't need a perfect father. I just need someone who chose to stay." And he did. The room fell into silence. No one spoke for a long time. Then Judge Dunley gave a small nod. "We will review the file, along with the evidence from the mother's journal. This hearing is adjourned. A final decision will be issued within 7 days." As they stepped out of the town hall, a light rain began to fall. Elena tilted her head toward the gray sky, feeling the cold droplets land softly on her face. "What do you think?" she asked softly. Mr. Ferris gave a rare smile. "I think your mother is smiling from above." They walked toward the old pickup truck. On the way home, they didn't speak much. But the silence between them had changed. No more doubt. No more hiding. Only love remained, quiet and steadfast, like a seed finally pushing through winter's last frost. Mr. Ferris was never allowed back into the classroom, although the final hearing concluded that he had committed no crime and confirmed that the relationship between him and Elena's mother was genuine, with no coercion or criminal wrongdoing. The pressure from the public, disapproval from parents, and the school board's cautious stance forced Oakridge High School to issue a decision: termination due to exceptional circumstances. The day he packed up his things, Elena waited outside. She saw the looks his former colleagues gave him. Some were sympathetic, others indifferent, a few cold. But he didn't bow his head. Carrying only a few old literature books, he left the place that had once been his whole life, silently. From that day forward, life became more difficult than ever. Without his teaching salary, Mr. Ferris had to take on manual labor around town, unloading goods at a local warehouse, shoveling snow, lifting boxes at the gas station, even cleaning houses. Each morning, he woke early, put on worn gloves, and carried a small canvas bag, walking through the biting cold to wherever the next job was. When he returned home, he still cooked, did laundry, and reviewed homework with Elena. Elena often cried in secret over the fresh calluses on his hands, over the battered shoes he never replaced. But he always smiled when he saw her studying, never once complaining. Years passed quietly, but with quiet resilience. Elena blossomed into a gentle yet strong-willed young woman. She excelled in her studies and consistently ranked at the top of her class. Her teachers began to realize she was not the child of a scandal, but a girl of fierce determination. She never hid her story. Whenever someone asked, she would answer directly, "Mr. Ferris is my father, and I'm proud of him." Her honesty startled people at first, then gradually changed them. One day, a classmate asked, "Aren't you ashamed? You know what people say." She smiled calmly. "I'd only be ashamed if I lived without kindness. My father? He's lived more honorably than many people in this town." No one dared ask again. One crisp autumn morning when Elena was 16, she and her father were repairing the backyard fence when Mrs. Lucia, who had once spread the cruelest rumors, approached, carrying a basket of bread. She stood there awkwardly for a moment, then spoke. "Elena, Mr. Ferris, I think I may have been wrong." They both looked up, surprised. "I didn't know the full story. I just repeated what people said. But yesterday, I saw Mr. Ferris carrying sacks of cement for the church, sweat pouring down his back, and then I saw Elena waiting nearby with a water bottle and towel. And I thought, if there's any love strong enough to survive public judgment, it must be the love between a father and daughter." She placed the basket on the porch step and quietly walked away without another word. Elena turned to her father. He smiled gently, eyes glistening. Slowly, Oakridge began to change. Not all at once, but piece by piece. People started asking Mr. Ferris to fix roofs, tend gardens, or tutor their children after school. One even asked him to help coach their child in literature for college entrance exams. At a scholarship ceremony, the new principal of Oakridge High shook Elena's hand and said, "I've never read an essay as moving as yours. Perhaps it's because you have a father who understands sacrifice." Elena turned to look at Mr. Ferris, standing quietly behind the rows of chairs, shy under the stage lights. And she understood. Even if he no longer stood at the blackboard, he had taught her, and this entire town, a lesson in quiet strength, unconditional love, and the power of forgiveness. One early winter evening, as snowflakes gently returned, Elena was knitting a new scarf, ash gray, like her father's old coat. She sat by the window, watching the snow fall, remembering the first days she had come to this house, when everything was so quiet, heavy, and cold. Now it was still the same house, but it held warmth, light, and laughter. "Dad," she said as he walked in, "I want to study education." He looked surprised. "I want to become a teacher," she continued, "because I want to stand in the place you were once forced to leave, and show that no one can take anything away from a person who lives with love." Mr. Ferris said nothing. He simply stepped forward and embraced her. Outside, the snow blanketed their little house once more. But inside were two hearts, hearts that had survived storms, endured loss, and now were writing a new chapter together. 10 years later, Elena was now a young literature teacher, teaching at the very same Oakridge High School, where her father had once been forced to leave. She stood at the front of the classroom with quiet confidence, her voice calm and resonant, always beginning each lesson with a question. Do you believe literature can heal? The students adored her, not just because she was brilliant, but because she understood them. She wasn't harsh or distant. She was gentle, steady, and kind, just like the man who had once taught her how to live through the harshest years of her life. After school, Elena would often return to the small wooden cabin nestled on the edge of the forest, the place where so many memories were buried. But now, that house held one less soul. 3 years earlier, Mr. Ferris had passed away due to chronic lung disease after an especially brutal winter. He died quietly, just as he had lived, without complaint, without asking for anything, leaving behind a notebook full of life advice and one final letter to his daughter. My dearest girl, I'm sorry I wasn't there to hold you when you needed me most. I'm sorry I wasn't braver, that I couldn't protect your mother, that I missed your first cry in this world. But from the moment I learned you existed, you became the only reason I stayed in this world. If there's another life after this one, I hope I get to be your father again. But this time, I'll be there from the very beginning. Elena kept the letter in a small glass frame on her desk. Every time she saw it, she felt stronger. That afternoon, as snow began to fall heavily, Elena locked the school gate and walked down the narrow path toward town. She stopped by the church, carrying a bouquet of lavender, her mother's favorite flower, and the scent that once filled the attic room where secrets had slept for years. The new priest, young and kind, opened the door. Elena, here to tell stories again? He asked with a smile. She nodded. In a small room behind the chapel, Elena ran a special class, free for orphans, abandoned children, and kids who simply had nowhere else to go after school. There, she taught not only reading and writing, but also stories of courage, sacrifice, and unconditional love. And there was one story she told more than any other, always on snowy days. The story of a teacher who had once been a father in secret and who fought quietly against judgment to love his daughter the best way he could. The children always listened wide-eyed, deeply moved. Was there really a father like that, Miss Elena? One little girl once asked. Elena simply smiled and placed her hand over her heart. I knew someone like that, and I'll be grateful to him forever. Years later, when Oakridge High celebrated its 100th anniversary, the school made an unprecedented decision to honor the teachers who had left a lasting legacy in its history. Among the names, listed alongside founders, award-winning educators, and published authors, was Matthew Ferris. The ceremony was held in the school's old auditorium. Elena was invited to speak on behalf of the younger generation of teachers and students. As she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight fell gently on her face, and the room fell into silence. There are people, she began, who only need to teach one lesson, take one stand, or commit one quiet act, and they change a life forever. And I am living proof. She turned toward her father's portrait, placed respectfully on the table of honor. In that frame, he was captured as he had always been. Gentle eyes, graying hair, an old tie, and the softest smile. I don't know if my father can hear this, she said, voice trembling slightly, but if he can, I want him to know. The door has opened again. The entire auditorium stood and applauded. Outside the window panes, snow began to fall, soft and silent like a nod from the heavens. That evening, Elena returned to the old wooden house. She opened the door and stepped inside the familiar space. On the table lay Mr. Ferris's notebook. She turned to the last page. There was only a single line. Winter is never cold, as long as there is light inside the house. She smiled, then walked to the fireplace, lit a fire, sat in Mr. Ferris's old rocking chair, and wrapped herself in the gray wool scarf she had knitted when she was 16. Outside, snow covered the roof once more. But inside, there was only warmth, and the eternal love of a father who had taught her to live, to forgive, and to open the door to love, even when the world had tried to shut it. The final memoir of Elena, now a 75-year-old woman recounting her life. I am 75 years old now. My hair is as white as the snow that falls each winter in Oakridge. My eyes have grown dim, but my memories remain sharp. I still live alone in the little wooden house by the forest. Yes, the same house, where a man once gave up everything to protect the daughter he couldn't claim. until silence was no longer an option. Every morning I sit by the window and watch the snow fall slowly onto the steps. I still have the gray scarf I knitted when I was 16. The old rocking chair my father used to sit in is still here. And on the table lies the notebook he left behind. Its corners frayed, but each page soaked in one thing: love. When I told this story for the first time, I was just 26, a young teacher. Back then I thought I was telling it for the children, the ones with no home, no voice. But over the years I realized I was telling it for myself, to remind me that I was once truly loved, that even if that love wasn't loud or perfect, it was real. I was once asked, "Do you resent the world for being so cruel to you?" And I simply smiled. How could I, when this world also gave me a father like him? He was never a famous man, no medals, no honors, but he had the quiet courage of a father who dared to embrace the truth, even if too late. And he had eyes that always looked at me with one thing only: faith. I have loved, married, had children and grandchildren, but perhaps the deepest love I ever received was his. The silent embrace on a snowy night when I said, "I don't need your apology. I just need you not to leave me again." Now, as I write these words, it's not for sympathy or sentiment, but so that if a child out there, somewhere, feels abandoned or unloved, they will know. There are kinds of love that don't show up on paper, that don't need blood, that never seek applause, but they exist, and they can warm an entire lifetime, just like my winter, which was never cold again. Because I once had a father, and he opened the door, so I could walk into life full of light and trust.